Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and I'm joined again but today by Tomer. How's it going, Tomer?
Hey, Seth, how's it going?
It's going good. Ready to talk even more Commander. Today we're talking about the deck that I think we both agreed is by far our favorite, Open Hostility.
This is definitely the way we like to play Magic, for sure.
Oh, yes. So, Tomer, why don't you take a minute and explain why this deck is at the top of our list?
All right. So, you're trying to decide what pre-constructed deck you want. You see Open Hostility, you wonder, what's the deal with this? Open Hostility, as the name implies, is just jumping out, making no friends, and just going aggressive right off the bat. So the deck is jam-packed with a lot of ways to go aggressive, and it also has a tokens sub-theme as well. It has ways to make tokens and then kind of make more tokens, proliferate and all that, and use tokens to build up your army and keep smashing face. So if you're interested in the most aggressive deck right off the bat out of all the decks, then you're probably going to look towards Open Hostility. And if you like tokens as a sub-theme and just smashing people's faces and not making any real alliances, again, this is the deck for you as well. Why me and Seth have been saying that it's our favorite, we're saying it jokingly because both of us are very much dirtly blue players who just like to draw cards and want to be left alone until we do something really sweet. And Open Hostility is like the antithesis of this. This is the type of deck that smashes us in the face and steals our lunch money. It's definitely not our play style, but we can definitely still talk about what's good and what's bad about this deck and show you, objectively speaking, why these cards are good or bad.
And I think that if you are a standard player that's new to Commander, this might be a good intro to Commander deck because it is sort of like a standard deck in the sense that standard's about turning creatures sideways, creature combat. That's how most of the games play out. So if that's the style of Magic you're familiar with, this is probably a good starting point rather than picking up some of the other decks we've talked about. We had kind of a group hug deck. We have a somewhat random chaotic deck. This one's pretty straightforward, so it might be a good intro to Commander deck if you're new to the format.
Or if you just have a bunch of control players in your play group and you wanna show them what's what, then you bust out this aggro deck and smash their faces while they dirtle. So
Well, speaking of killing control players, maybe even two control players in one attack phase, what do you think of the four-color commander Saskia the Unyielding?
well, Saskia the Unyielding is pretty straightforward. She is a very aggressive commander, and whenever you choose a player when she enters the battlefield, and whenever you deal combat damage to a player, your creatures also deal that much damage to the chosen player. So at the very least, she's doubling up your creature combat damage. So that's really efficient for 4 mana. She herself already comes out of the gate swinging. She has vigilance and haste. So she's doing essentially 6 damage on the first turn she enters the battlefield, and all your other creatures essentially have like a pseudo double strike ability as well, where they're just dealing double the damage they normally do.
So one thing that I like about this card, and I didn't realize it until I was talking to Richard about it, and he brought up the fact that sometimes you get in a commander game where you have one player, probably Tomer, that pillow forts up so you can't really attack them. And this commander actually allows you to be somewhat political. So Tomer pillow forts himself up. You can kind of make an alliance with someone and say, yeah, I'm going to attack you. It's going to deal damage to you, but I'm going to choose Tomer with Saskia the Unyielding, and we're actually going to get through damage on Tomer through his Ghostly Prisons and Spear of Safeties and all these Pillow Fort cards. So I like that it gives an option to deal with that player, which
Oh no.
is often hard to deal with. I'm also disappointed because I am probably just as likely, or maybe more likely than you, to be that player, but it does do something that no other card really does. So I like the uniqueness of it, even though I wouldn't really play it myself.
Yeah, it's a very, I hadn't even considered that possibility. It's a very interesting way of getting around Pillow 40 players.
Well, let's move on to the partnered commander. Up next, we have Ravos Soultender, good old 2/2 for 5 mana. It does fly, though. What do you think about this one, Tomer?
I have a mini rant brewing on this one because I feel like this is just lazy design. It's like, let's take a really generic white ability. Oh, +1/+1 to your other creatures. That'll be fine. And then, oh, let's add a generic black ability. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Very generic black. And there's no synergy between the two. Like, they both deal with creatures, I guess, and it's boring and it's just like lazy, and I don't know. I'm not a fan of him. He's also 5 mana for this effect, and I think that's just way overcosted. I think he's still fine, and I think he can be used as a partner or as part of the 99, but I probably wouldn't. However, there is one deck where I think he actually is very useful in, and that's in Alicia decks, where you can cheat. You can basically cheat creatures from your graveyard to the battlefield, attacking, as long as their power is equal to is 2 or less, which Ravos is. So you get around that nasty converted mana cost and just shoot him into play, and then he's actually pretty good.
And it's worth noting that Alicia is actually part of the pre-construct deck. So maybe they were going to make this like a 5/5, and they're like, no, we're going to put Alicia in this deck, so let's drop it down to a 2/2. Everyone will love it.
Yeah, I think it's a good combination. It's just a underwhelming card by itself, and I feel like, yeah, not a fan.
All right, well, let's move on to maybe a more exciting partnered commander. We get the Elf Druid, Tana the Bloodsower. So this is a creature in the long line of 1/1 Saproling creature token makers. What do you think about this one, Tomer?
I like this a lot more. She creates as many Saproling creatures as she does combat damage. So she deals 2 damage, makes 2 Saproling tokens. But obviously, she has also trample, and she really wants to have her power raise. So you have a bunch of ways of doing it. You have giant growth effects, obviously. You have scavenge abilities, so you put +1/+1 counters on her. You can put auras or equipments on her. And just the bigger she gets, the more damage she'll do to a player and the more Saprolings you make. So I think if you play her in a vacuum, she's not that great. However, if you actually build around her a bit and really increase her size, then she becomes a very efficient engine. And obviously, once you have all the Saproling tokens, you're going to buff all of them as well, and then smash face. And I expect myself to lose many times to Tana, to Richard or Tom, and yeah, that's how it's going to go.
Yeah, it seems like a decent Vorthos build around me, or Voltron rather, build around me commander, where you can pump it up and kind of go wide, make a ton of tokens, get in that commander damage, and maybe use your Saproling tokens to do some chump blocking to keep yourself alive while you're beating down with this huge commander. So I think it's neat and pretty interesting. Also, the 2/2 theme continues, so the whole deck seems to be built around Alicia, so you can get back every commander from the graveyard. So I think this one is definitely one of the better partnered commanders in this deck, and I think it's cool. I could imagine playing it. It's not one of my favorite. It's still sort of an aggressive, attacking type of commander, but I think it's a reasonable card, and you could do some fun things with it in tokens decks, in Voltron decks, so there's some possibilities there for Tana, I believe.
Yeah, I agree with all that for sure.
Well, let's move on to our final partnered commander, and we have Tymna the Weaver. So another Orzhov commander. This one a little more typical with the Orzhov abilities. What do you think of this 2/2, Tomer?
Well, this one draws X cards, so I immediately love it. And that's it. No, well, she's very interesting because she wants your opponents to be dealt combat damage. You can obviously deal that combat damage. You have some degree of control of how many cards you're going to draw. However, I don't know. I think it's very interesting. I like the ability that she has lifelink, and her card draw effect also requires life to draw that many cards. I think she's aggressive, and she's more on the unique side of Orzhov, because Orzhov generally likes to sit back and exploit and be defensive. And Tymna, I have no idea how to say it. I'm sure the comment section will tell us. But she actually wants to be aggressive to draw those cards. So as much as I loathe to be the aggressor, if you're going to let me draw cards out of that, yeah, I'm going to do that. So that is an interesting way to get people like me to be more aggressive and attack more often, because there is some card draw at the end of the tunnel there. So I do like her.
It's also interesting that it incentivizes you to kind of spread the love around and not just go after one opponent, because it triggers based on how many opponents were dealt combat damage. So it puts you in this position where I think combat's going to be really interesting when you have a Tymna on the battlefield, because you got to figure out how you can split up your attackers in a way to get the most triggers out of your commander. Because remember, there's no mana cost. It's just life. You start at 40 life. She has lifelink, so paying life isn't bad. So you really want to be dealing damage, combat damage, to as many opponents as possible each turn. So I think it's interesting the type of gameplay and combat steps that she incentivizes, whether that's actually good and as far as being powerful and a staple commander, I'm not so sure, but I think it's unique in how it pushes the gameplay and what direction it pushes the game. Well, let's move out of the realm of commanders and into the 99, and the aggression continues with charging Cinderhorn and Elemental Ox. So, Tomer, what do you think about this one?
I love the fact that they made an elemental ox for one. That's fantastic.
The art is pretty sweet.
Oh yeah, I could totally see like Bruise or something throwing this at somebody. I really like it. I'm not, again, like I've never been like a huge preference towards aggro cards, but I really like the design of this one. It does force people to attack, not commit like their entire board to attack, but at least like make an attempt. And if not, then your charging Cinderhorn is going to start dealing a lot of damage. It's going to start picking up a lot of counters, and the more counters it picks up, the more damage it starts to deal. It's already a 4/2 haste by itself, which means it's going to have some struggles trying to get in for damage by itself, but it can if there is somebody who's open, and I think the damage will start ticking up relatively fast.
Yeah, and of course, as with counters, proliferate, things like that gives you ability to kind of amp up the damage even more. It also is symmetrical, so it makes sure that you are attacking, or else you are going to take that damage as well. So I think it's a really unique design, and sometimes you get in these commander games or commander playgroups where games just never seem to end. 3 hours have gone by, everyone's just dirtling. Cards like Charging Cinderhorn and decks like the one we're talking about today give you something to do to kind of speed up the game a little bit and make sure things keep moving along at a reasonable pace.
Yeah, my one worry about this card is maybe the damage takes a little bit too long to tick up to really ramp up, because the first Fury counter you do is only 1 damage, and then it goes to 2, and I don't know. I have to see it in play to see how much damage is going to start outputting and how quickly it does, but we'll see. Hopefully it does deal a significant amount of damage generally to like speed up the game, as you said. Otherwise, yeah, I'm not sure.
Well, equipment are a popular subtype in Commander, and we have a new one, Conqueror's Flail. So, Tomer, what do you think about this equipment?
Well, it is cost effective if you have a 4-color or even 3-color creature that you attach it to, which in these decks, every single main commander is 4 colors, so it's going to get +4/+4. But the really interesting part is, as long as it's attached to your creatures, your opponents can't cast spells during your turn. That means no counter spells, no combat tricks, no shenanigans that Control and Trixie decks often do with untapped lands. So not only does this help aggro decks just do their aggro thing without worrying about tricks from the opponents. It also lets you pull off your game-winning moves without any opposition as well, be it a combo or just making your army huge with an overrun effect or something like that. You don't have to worry about a fog effect or an instant speed board wipe of some sort. So Conqueror's Flail is going to be really useful for many decks that are aggressive.
Yeah, I think it's unique because we see cards like this in white primarily. I'm thinking of is it
Grand Abolisher?
Grand Abolisher, that's what it is. So we see this effect in some colors, but Conqueror's Flail gives this effect to other colors that don't normally have a way to protect themselves on their own turn. So I think that it will see a lot of play just for that reason alone, because it is pretty powerful to know that it's almost like you cast a silence or something that says your opponent can't cast spells this turn. If you have this equipped up, once you get to your turn, all of a sudden you have free reign to do whatever you want. So I think this card is actually pretty good. Plus, for 2 to cost and 2 to equip in a 3 or 4 color deck, giving your creature +3/+3 +4/+4 is a pretty good deal for the mana cost and the equip cost. It can make a reasonable sized creature into a really big threat pretty quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. It made Saskia deal 7 damage, and she doubles that essentially with her triggered ability. So yeah, it's a lot of damage. It adds up very quickly, and it works very well with the main commander.
Well, let's move on to a card that strikes me as incredibly odd. Divergent Transformations, essentially a red polymorph for 2 creatures. Tomer, what do you think of this one?
I absolutely love this card. Yeah, as you said, it is essentially a red polymorph. It's instant speed. I don't think the regular polymorph is instant speed. There was also a instant speed polymorph, a synthetic destiny that was printed in blue, but now we get to see it in red, and I think this is the best version of polymorph yet. You can exile 2 target creatures, and then just reveal, for each of those creatures, the controller reveals cards from the top of his or her library until they reveal a creature card and put it directly into play. You can use this either to protect your creatures from a board wipe, for example, or targeted removal, or you can just spin the wheel and hope that your opponent's really hard to deal with creature can be replaced by something much more manageable. For example, if you're staring down an Avacyn Angel of Hope and you have no way of dealing with this indestructible 8/8 flying Trampler of Doom, you can just exile it and hopefully it will turn into like a Solemn Simulacrum or something even worse than that. So I think it's very flexible. You would use it in response to board wipe to maybe swap out your creatures. Actually, no, that wouldn't work, would it?
I think they would still die unless you hit like an indestructible creature or something.
Right. Oh, okay. Well, it will work. It will work against targeted removal at least. So if somebody wants to Doomblade one of your creatures, you can exile it and cash it in for something else with no real downside. So
it feels weird to me that this just says exile 2 creatures in red. Red doesn't typically exile creatures, not without dealing damage at least. So that part of it strikes me as odd. My question for you though, Tomer, is say you're going to put Divergent Transformation into your deck. How much does that influence your deck building? When you're putting together your 99, are you saying, well, I don't want to play as many 1-drops and 2-drops because I'm going to try Divergent Transformation and I don't want to hit those cards? Or do you just jam it and let the heart of the cards take control and fall where they may?
Well, there's I think there's 2 ways of building this, and one way, as you said, is possibly just focusing on very minimal creatures and a couple token makers, so that whenever you polymorph with Divergent Transformations, you're always going to hit like a big significant creature and always get a huge upgrade. There's some mono blue decks that focus on this. There's like Jalira Master Polymorphist is all about this, where she basically does polymorph effects, and all you want to do is make some tokens and then keep your deck's density of creatures really high-powered creatures. Or you can just use this as a value card for token decks. token decks that aren't running that many creatures in general, and you can make like a bunch of 1/1 soldiers off of Secure the Waste or a cycle decree of something,
Justice.
decree of justice. Yes, then you could just trade those 1/1 creatures, one of many, into real threats. So it could just be a cost-effective way of ramping out some bigger creatures.
So let's move on to our next creature. We're getting to the land of massive green creatures, Primeval Protector. Essentially a 1 mana, potentially 10/10, that anthems your team. So, Tomer, is this card actually good?
I can't imagine it being good. I want to like it, and yes, in best case situation, if your opponents have 10 creatures on the board, then yes, it costs 1 mana, and you get a 10/10 in the battlefield, and all your other creatures rather, get a +1/+1 counter on it. In the ideal situation, your opponents have 10 plus creatures on the board. You have like 5 plus creatures on the board. You cast this, you get great value. Everybody's happy. Well, you're happy, your opponents aren't. But I don't know. I think there's too many variables for Primeval Protector to be good. I want to say like an average. There's probably going to be maybe 5 creatures on the board for your opponents, and then you're casting 6 mana for a 10/10 without any evasion or any resiliency whatsoever, and you put a +1/+1 counter on your creatures. That's not good enough for me. I don't know. I'm not too thrilled with it. How about you, Seth? Do you like it?
I think that I think this is one of those cards that's going to depend on your play group and what kind of decks that people are playing. If you're playing against a bunch of relatively control players that are playing spells, I think this card is very bad. But I think if you know going into your weekly commander game that, this one of my friends is going to be playing a tokens deck, and this one of my friends likes to play a lot of creatures, then I would start considering it. Because 10/10 is big if you're casting it for, let's say, 5 or less mana. And the putting a counter on everything, we've talked before in other videos about how +1/+1 counter synergies are one of the most popular mechanics, not only in Commander, but in Magic's history. So there's a lot of things you can do with the +1/+1 counters. So I think that's my takeaway. I would not just jam this in the dark in a random deck, but if I had a specific deck that cared about the Anthem effect, cared about the counters, and I knew that my opponents kind of had an idea what they were playing and thought it was going to be creature heavy, then I would look towards Primeval Protector.
Yeah, I think you swayed me a bit there, Seth. I think it's more of my own personal bias, because if I see my opponents have 10 plus creatures on the board, I'm more looking for a Wrath of God effect rather than playing something like this. But at the same time, if there aren't a lot of board wipes, you can really take advantage of it with Primeval Protector, getting a huge discount and then just having the better army. So you don't necessarily need to kill your opponent's creatures. You just have to have a better army to basically run them over with.
So, well, Tomer, you get another shot to evaluate a big green creature. Stonehoof Chieftain. Does this one excite you anymore? You're never going to cast it for 1 mana, but you get an 8/8 for 8. So what do you think, Tomer, of the 8/8?
This one, it's 8 mana. It's 8 mana. It's a lot. It's indestructible, which is nice, and it has trample. So an 8/8 trample indestructible is really good. I mean, it's going to survive most board wipes, most removal spells. It's 8 mana, so I mean, in green has the best ramp out of all of them. So if any deck can legitimately run an 8/8 creature for 8, it's going to be green, and so that's appropriate. But man, I'm trying so hard to like this card, but it's not me. It's not me.
I don't even think this one is you, Tomer. I just think this card is unexciting, because when you consider what 8 mana should get you in green, you're looking at Terastodons, you're looking at Vorinclex, you're looking at really huge, powerful, game-swinging type effects that do something right away, and then you have this, it's just a big, hard-to-deal-with creature, and that just doesn't really excite me. So I think that as far as I mean, it's good at being big, and it is big, and being indestructible is an upside, but if I'm paying 8 mana in a green deck, I want something that's doing more than just being big and being hard to deal with. So I think for me, I can't really imagine playing this one pretty much under any circumstances. If I'm tapping that amount of mana, I want something that's more immediately impactful than Stonehoof Chieftain.
I'm right with you there on that, Seth. And also, there is one card that I would like to bring up that is a good comparison to this one, and it's my style of card, Spear Breaker Behemoth. It's a 7 mana, 5/5 from the Shards of Alara block. It's indestructible, does not have trample, and it's not an 8/8. However, you can pay 1 mana to give target creature with power 5 or greater indestructible this turn. So the main difference between these two is not only is it's a worse attacker, obviously. However, you can use its activated ability instead of a triggered ability to give your other big creatures indestructible. This lets you survive most board wipes, and it also lets you survive targeted removal. This guy, the new guy, he's great at being a better creature by himself, and he's also great at giving trample and indestructible to your attacking creatures, but he won't save your board from a board wipe or anything like that. That said, though, I guarantee you Richard and Tom are going to destroy us with this card.
I will say that it is a little scary that immediately gives everything trample and indestructible. So you play this, hopefully, I guess it's kind of win more. If you have a huge, massive board of big, powerful creatures and you drop this, it's not really an overrun, but it can almost play out the same. It's going to make combat really miserable on your opponent, so I guess there's some amount of upside there, and I definitely agree with you. I can imagine myself losing to Stonehoof Chieftain, and that will be a very sad episode of Commander Clash.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, just so you viewers know, we have a clear bias towards Control and Dirtly. So if we took somebody else from Commander Clash, like Tom or Richard, they probably would enjoy this a lot more and be more pro Stonehoof Chieftain than us. So there is a bias going on.
That is very true and a good point. Actually, yeah. So, Tomer, we've reached the end of our Open Hostility preview. So, as we've done every day, do you have a favorite card that we've talked about today?
Absolutely, and it would be Divergent Transformations. I like Polymorph a lot. I like Instant Speed Polymorph a lot. If you do 4-player free-for-all, so you're taking off 3 mana from its casting cost, paying 4 mana is essentially Polymorph, that's the casting cost, for 2 creatures and Instant Speed, and you can use it both defensively on your own creatures or offensively to take out big threats. I like both those options. I like having both of them on the same card. I'm going to really enjoy brewing with this card once it comes out.
Oh, I think I'm trying to come up with a plan B because I don't want to just name the same card as you, but I guess I just got to stick with Divergent Transformations as well. It's just the most me card. Looking over all the other new cards, it's just a lot of big or, on the other hand, aggressive creatures is pretty much most of the cards in the deck. I'm more of a spells type person, and it has the janky brew around me aspect that I like. So I guess we're in agreement on this one as far as Divergent Transformation goes.
Yeah, I thought you were going to pick Charging Cinderhorn for a minute there.
I tried my best to find another card I liked, but I couldn't do it. Anyway, that's been our preview for Open Hostility. Tomer, thanks so much for taking the time to break it down.
Thanks for having me, man. It was awesome.
Yeah, it's always fun. And thank you, everyone, for watching. So make sure to tune in tomorrow as we go over another Commander 2016 deck, and we'll talk to you soon.